Hey everybody, welcome back. I do want to preface this episode with a trigger warning. This case does involve children. If that is something that you cannot listen to, I advise you to go ahead and skip past this episode. That being said, welcome back to True Crime with Prime Calspect. I am your host, Hannah. Today we're going to be covering the Watts family murders, and let's dive right on in. So, in the early hours of August 13th, 2018, in Frederick, Colorado, Christopher Lee Watts murdered his pregnant wife, Shanann, by strangulation, and their two children, Bella, who was 4, and Celeste, who was 3, by smothering them. He buried Shanann in a shallow grave near an oil storage facility and dumped his children's body into crude oil tanks. Watts initially maintained his innocence in his family's disappearance, but was arrested on August 15th after confessing in an interview with detectives to murdering Shanann. He later admitted to murdering his children. So, a little background about the family. On November 6, 2018, Watts pleaded guilty to multiple counts of first-degree murder as part of a plea deal when the death penalty was removed from sentencing. I do want to say that the death penalty was later abolished in Colorado in 2020, so that is no longer a thing there. He was sentenced to 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole. 3 had to be served consecutively. Christopher Lee Watts and Shanann Cathryn Ruzek were from North Carolina. They met in 2010 and were married on November 3rd, 2012. The couple had 2 daughters, Bella Marie Watts and Celeste Cathryn, better known as CeCe Watts. At the time of her death, Shanann was 15 weeks pregnant with a boy who was to be named Nico. The Watts family lived in a 5-bedroom home at 2825 Saratoga Trail in Frederick, Colorado, which was purchased in 2013. The family declared bankruptcy in 2015. Christopher was employed by Anadarko Petroleum while Shanann worked from home selling a product called Thrive for a multi-level marketing company named Lavelle. At approximately 1:48 a.m. on Monday, August 13th, 2018, Shanann returned from a business trip that she had went on to Arizona. Her friend and colleague, Nicole Atkinson, brought her home. Over the weekend, Chris Watts had been home with their daughters. Later that day, Shanann and the girls were reported missing by Atkinson, who became concerned when Shanann missed a scheduled OB appointment and failed to return her text messages. After Shanann missed a business meeting, Atkinson went to the Watts residence at about 12:10 p.m. When the doorbell and knocks went unanswered, Atkinson notified Christopher, who was at work, and called the Frederick Police Department. So I do want to take just a second to say we all need a friend like Nicole Atkinson. If it hadn't have been for her becoming concerned and acting on that, we really don't know how this case would have ended. A Frederick police officer arrived to conduct a welfare check at around 1:40 p.m. During the welfare check, Christopher gave the police officer permission to search the house, where the family dog was discovered unharmed. There was no sign of Shanann or the girls, and they also found Shanann's purse, which had her keys and her medicine, and her phone was later discovered between the couch cushions in the family home. Her car, which was still in the garage, still contained the girls' car seats. Her wedding ring was found on the bedside table. The FBI and Colorado Bureau of Investigation, or you'll hear me refer to it as CBI, joined the investigation the next day. Watts initially told police that he had no idea where his family might be and that he had not seen his wife since 5:15 a.m. the previous day when he left for work. He gave interviews to Denver stations KMGH-TV and KUSA-TV outside the house, pleading for the return of his wife and daughters. Investigators with search dogs could be heard on the property during the interview. So let's talk about his interviews that he put out there on the news channels. His behavior was not that of someone whose children and pregnant wife were missing. There was not a lot of concern there. He just smiled at times. He acted very normal. He was rocking back and forth. The body language was just not there. I know that we all react differently in situations like this. I pray to God that I never have to be in that situation. But we all would act differently, I'm sure. But there's still some things that are a baseline for somebody going through that. And Chris Watts did not give any of that. There was no concern. He was smiling. His body language just did not align with somebody whose pregnant wife and children were missing. So on August 15th, 2018, the FBI joined the search for Shanann and her girls. Chris Watts was administered a polygraph test, which he failed. He subsequently confessed to his father, Ronnie, and then to authorities that he had killed Shanann, but falsely claimed that he did so because Shanann had smothered their daughters. If you go back and you look at videos of Shanann, because, due to her work, sorry guys, bear with me because I do get a little emotional at times and I apologize for that ahead of time. So sometimes I have to gather myself and gather my thoughts back, and I apologize for any pauses. So Shanann, because of her business, she was constantly posting on social media. There was videos of her and her girls and pictures of her and her girls that were posted pretty much on a daily basis. If you go back and watch those, she seemed like a wonderful mother who really cared for her children. She had lupus, and she claimed that the products that she got from Thrive and that she was selling helped her to overcome that. And she just seemed like she truly loved those girls. I know social media, you can portray yourself as anything you want to portray yourself as, but I truly believe that she was a wonderful mother. I really do. So, as I said, he falsely claimed that she smothered her daughters. I'm not buying that. I didn't buy it from the word go. Chris related that he discovered Bella's corpse and that when he found Shanann in the process of strangling Celeste, he strangled Shanann in a fit of rage before disposing of their bodies at the oil field where he worked for Anadarko. Chris was arrested that day. Chris marked the locations of the bodies on a photograph of the oil field for investigators, who arrived there on August 16th at 11 p.m. Chris's daughters, who had been smothered by Watt's bare hands, were found in crude oil storage tanks, while Shanann was buried in a shallow grave. Bella and Celeste's bodies had been pushed through a hatch at the top of different oil tanks, with the lid being 8 inches in diameter. According to the medical examiner, Bella had scratches on her left buttock from being shoved through this hole. A tuft of blonde hair was found on the edge of one of those hatches. Once again, guys, I apologize. On August 21st, Watts was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, including an additional 1 count per child cited as death of a child who had not yet attained 12 years of age, and the defendant was in a position of trust. Unlawful termination of a pregnancy, and 3 counts of tampering with a deceased human body. By the day of his arrest, Chris had been fired from Anadarko. He was denied bail at the first court appearance. At a later hearing, his bail was set at $5 million, with him being required to put down at least 15% to be released. On November 29th, Colorado authorities released surveillance footage captured in the early morning hours of August 13th on a neighbor's security camera, which showed Chris, hours after he killed his wife and daughters, loading gas can into the bed of his pickup truck and then backing the vehicle into the garage. Police believe that he was transporting the bodies of his family to the remote oil work site where they were later discovered. This was shortly after Shanann was seen returning home from a business trip, and it proved that she never left the home with their daughters the day they disappeared, as Chris had claimed to police. So I do want to preface this and say that Chris has told two different stories about where the girls were unalived. He said the first time he done it at home, then he later went to say he had done it, but they came back to life. So he said that he smothered them at the oil field. I don't want to get too much into the details of that right now, just because it's hard for me to talk about. So, that being said, let's continue. The case had been connected in the media to the crime of a family alienator. Many of these crimes occurred in August before school starts, which may delay detection and investigation. According to former FBI profiler Candace DeLong, cases such as this are rare because family annihilators usually commit suicide after these murders, an action that Watts claimed to have contemplated out of guilt of his actions. Watts pleaded guilty to the murders on November 6. The death penalty was not put forward by the district attorney at the request of Shanann's family, who did not wish for any further deaths. They were supportive of his decision to accept the plea deal. On November 19th, he was sentenced to 5 life sentences, 3 consecutive and 2 concurrent, without the possibility of parole. He received an additional 48 years for the unlawful termination of Shanann's pregnancy and a 36 years for 3 charges of tampering with deceased body. His sentence began immediately. On December 3rd of 2018, Watts was moved to an out-of-state location due to security concerns. On December 5th, he arrived at Dodge Correctional Institution, a maximum security prison in Wisconsin, to continue serving his life sentence. That being said, all of this was because Christopher had an affair with a coworker named Nicole Kessinger. He had been with her weeks prior to this, so let me just back up a little bit and fill you in there. So his family, meaning his wife and his 2 daughters, had went to visit his family and her family in North Carolina for 6 weeks. Chris joined them the last week that they were there. The weeks that his family was in North Carolina and he was at home, he pretty much stayed the entire time with Nicole Kessinger, who he met at work. So, next episode, we will dive into that a little bit, because I personally, my opinion, do not think Nicole Kessinger is as innocent as she portrayed herself to be. There are many others who feel that she isn't innocent, that she had something in some way to do with the murders of Shanann and her girls. And I believe that. So in the next episode, we'll dive a little bit into Nicole Kessinger and things that she done that make her look guilty. This has to do with text messages that she deleted and Google searches that she deleted and phone calls and where the phone calls pinged. So we will jump into that in the next episode. As always, be kind to others. Most importantly, be kind to yourself. You are loved. You are valuable. You are worthy. Have a blessed day, and thanks for listening.